Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast, an ongoing series of conversations and considerations to help people understand and embrace their own unique creativity for fulfilling lives and brilliant careers. My name is Ben Talon. I'm an illustrator and author, and I bring 16 years of creative industry experience working with the New York Times, The Guardian, the Premier League, and more. And I invite designers, artists, psychologists, scientists, coaches, athletes, sensitivity experts, and all kinds of thought leaders to help us broaden our knowledge of creativity. Creativity is a fundamental pillar of human happiness, a vital ingredient in the solutions to our problems, but so often misunderstood. The show is supported by founding sponsor and B Corp, Illustration X. Take a look at their stunning range of illustrators and animators at illustrationx.com. If you like the music for the show, it's by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on Spotify and all good music streaming services. Today, following the episode with historian Professor Carl Chinn, MBE, I am digging deeper into what it means to be working class. And instead of telling you a story, I'm going to read you a chapter, because that's what the chapter, The Power of Naughty from the Creative Condition book, is all about. So I'm going to read it out to you as a little exclusive. And later in the week, I'm going to be reading Dirty Energy, the follow-on chapter, because I believe that these paint a far better story of the working class situation than I could tell in an overt piece. This is the Creative Condition. Welcome to the show. My name is Ben Talon. I'm your host. This is the Creative Condition. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a vibrant, resonant, playful week, because that's what we do on this show. We like to get messy. We like to explore ideas. And for the last decade, I have been exploring human creativity from all kinds of angles. Just recently, we've had the likes of Yasmin Ali, a chemical engineer working in sustainable energy, on the show, discussing adaptive creativity and invention, innovation, imagination, in how we are transitioning the global energy system to something that might give us a chance of staying on this broken planet. We've had Professor Carl Chinn last week, working class legend. So Carl is a historian from Birmingham. There's a lot of work there about the local history, but he's also something of an expert on the urban working classes in the UK, and he was the perfect man to speak to about the current malaise, the difficulties for the working class to get into the arts, because it's always been somewhat gatekept by those from a more privileged background. There have been blips, moments in history where there's been a bit of a surge. I think of the Young British Artists movement in the mid-90s and the euphoric curiosity and playfulness back then, and some really interesting original stuff coming out of the art scene, and a bit of an uprising of working class people. But they've been few and far between, and I've experienced difficulties myself because of my background. Professor Carl Chinn talked about a few of those on the show, so if you haven't listened, please do go back and check it out. But what I'm going to be doing today is reading you a chapter from the Creative Condition book, and the chapter is called The Power of Naughty. First, I'm going to thank the sponsor, and then I'll tell you why I'm reading that chapter. Founding sponsor of the show, the wonderful Illustration X, supporting a global range of illustration and animation people. Got that one wrong now. Portfolios. It's all up there. illustrationx.com. Check them out now. Global range of people. They represent in our industry, and they do loads of great work for the industry, including their Trend X report, which lets you into the experiences of the front line of their agenting team. Really great stuff. So go and take a look. illustrationx.com. Still supporting the Ukrainian Institute as they go through a horrendous time of war. If you want to support the Ukrainian creative community who need your help right now, you can do anything from as little as a retweet right through to commissioning their great talent. So have a look, ui.org.ua. So what did you make of the Carl Chinn episode, guys? I got some fantastic feedback. I was absolutely delighted by the heartfelt responses that I got through both comments and a series, actually quite a lot of private messages from people from my background, which is very much working class, who have felt distrust of others in the industry, who have felt marginalised, and that there is a class ceiling there that has made them think differently about their route into industry, and has often brought them imposter syndrome even deep into their career. So what I thought would be a wonderful response to that episode, because I did start writing a piece which was exploring the idea of what it means to be working class other than an economic bracket. And what I thought was a better idea was to visit the book, because there is a big chapter in there called The Power of Naughty, and it's a chapter in which I explore mischievous energy and what naughtiness is, which I consider it to be an expression of a need. So if a kid is being naughty, and it's something I tried to apply to my own young twins when they were kids, yes, it's frustrating when they're acting up, but instead of calling them naughty or punishing them, I would try to just get a hold of my mind, apply a bit of mindfulness and think, what is the word here that I need to replace naughty with? So is it that they are being curious? Because if they're opening cupboard doors or they're going places they shouldn't go, is that not curiosity? And could that not be met with a remedy for that curiosity? Do you know what I mean? Could we not have a conversation about what's in that cupboard and do something about that before telling them why maybe they shouldn't be going in it at this point? And I think that that's something that applies to all humans throughout their lives. That's not just a kid thing. So in the context of The Power of Naughty, we're looking at misbehaviour and rebellious energy and the potential for creativity if you can harness and redirect that energy. And what I got as I read back through the chapter, because it's, I don't sit there reading my own book very often, so you kind of forget what you've written, was that this is a very working class chapter, and it does offer you an insight into the struggles and the mindset, lack of confidence that is very typical for working class people. And there are many stories. I give the example from Jen Lucas, who is the head of home at a secure children's home. Shane Gall, a lifelong friend of mine, or at least since teenage years, who had real fire and could be real naughty as a kid at school, partly because of his background, partly because of the lack of catering in the education system for a brain like his, which was very curious but not very well suited to the academic system. And I know that my listeners for this show will resonate and relate to that. So he's in the chapter. Mac Ferrari and Jake 100, co-founders of Bike Storms. So I look at interviews with these people, and it does really give you a sense of what a working class upbringing is like and the challenges it poses. So I hope you enjoyed this chapter today. Do get us your thoughts, hello@bentalon.com. You can also get me on LinkedIn, sometimes Instagram, but I take time to see those messages these days, so you are better off on the email hello@bentalon.com if you want to get in touch. Always happy to hear from you lovely listeners. Put yourself forward for a show. If you want to contribute to this conversation, I'm well up for that. I've got other chats lined up. I've got Sarah Prinsloo coming up. She's from a very much a working class background. She addresses the topic of being working class in her work through sculpture, through painting, through zines, through writing. She's a real wonderful talent and a real favourite human of mine. And before I get into this chapter, I just want to read you this wonderful story that I was sent by Chris, who goes under Stickman in his design practice. That's Chris Wilson. So check him out. It's spelled Stickman without an I. Well, without an I or without an A. So STCKMN. He's an award-winning one-man creative studio with more than one expertise, and he's based in the Glasgow area. So Chris really resonated with this episode with Carl Chinn, and he sent me a beautiful story which I would love to read to you just now with Carl's blessing. With Chris's blessing. So Chris messaged in and he said, it was really good listening to you and Carl speak on the recent episode. A ton of things resonating with me. Coming from a working class background myself, from an industry heavy town, that's Clydebank, known for Singer sewing machines and shipyards, I suffered from a lot of the same experiences of feeling the arts weren't for me, an elitist pursuit, but I always looked on from the sidelines, interested and curious to learn how to break into it some form or another. I'd like to share with you a story from my time at college. My lecturer, John Stevenson, was an old school type of guy, one of those get on with it type approaches. If we were caught talking during his class, he'd come up behind you with a big set of janitor-style keys and crack you on the back of the head to get you to stop and listen. I was always keen to do things outside of college to gain experience, and he knew this, so he asked me along to the opening of an art gallery exhibition for Richard Wilson in Edinburgh. I said that wasn't for me, and had never been to anything like that before. He said nonsense and encouraged me to head along with him as his guest, throw on a shirt and some shoes. So I reluctantly went along, arrived in this white box of a room with a raised mezzanine and a table full of wine and snacks, and I fired over, nervous as fuck, and downed a glass of red wine to get some Dutch courage. After a few minutes of standing around, I said to him I felt out of place and uncomfortable and was going to head off home. He said, "Before I leave, do him a favour and just go speak to someone." So I timidly climbed the stairs of the mezzanine and stepped in front of a large photo of sculpture. The artist had deconstructed a ship, cutting it into segments, then photographed it. I stood for a minute with a wine in hand admiring it and could see a young woman on one photo down looking at another work. So I thought, fuck it, and approached her and said, "What do you think? Enjoying the exhibition?" And her answer is something that changed the way I looked at culture, the arts, and all the things I had thought were reserved for others. She said, "To be honest, this is my first time at one of these things, and I'm not really sure." It was then that I realised there's no such thing as not for me. I was fearing that I'd be found out or looked at as not welcome, and this girl was the exact same. I'd created this perspective in my head that all those in attendance must be part of the club, or know the artist, or be part of the art world, but that wasn't the reality. My lecturer, taking the time to invite me along because I had shown an interest, changed my life. He later arranged a trip for all the students to visit New York City and get a tour of the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. Having folk like him looking out for the lower class and giving them opportunities is definitely something that stayed with me, and I often think back to that moment each time I feel out of place or anxious to put myself in a place of discomfort and give me the pep talk to go for it. Just wanted to share that, as I know you often enjoy hearing listener experiences. I do. I really love hearing from my listeners, so please do get in touch if that resonates with you as much as it did me, because that is one beautiful story. And just to pull up something from that, Chris used the term lower class there. And it's something that Carl Chinn felt quite aggrieved about, in the sense that the use of lower class, it's very demeaning, isn't it? It puts us below the other classes. And I don't see it like that. I think economically, working class, middle class, upper class, they're very defined. They're very different. But the lifestyle and the values, they overlap. I have friends who are incredibly posh, who are from very upper class backgrounds, who've been some of my biggest champions in this industry. Wonderful, real, warm humans in every way that working class people are. Same for the middle class. I've got great friends in all three class brackets, and I just wish there was more integration, in terms of the way where we live, how we live, culture. And I think that Chris's story really highlights that, because it is that feeling of not belonging, and then when you really just get in there and get stuck in, even if you are different to the people there, you realise that you can amuse, you bring value, your personality brings value by default, because you are unique, and unique is the ultimate currency in the arts. So I just think that's a really wonderful story that I found very heartwarming. I was delighted that Chris sent that in, so cheers, mate, for that. I'm going to talk to Chris for a future episode, because I think it's well worth drilling down into that mindset. It's something I too shared. I remember being in front of those white walls, at the end of my BTEC in graphic design, and talking to my lecturer, Bill, and him telling my parents that there's no reason I couldn't go on to work in the industry and earn good money, and just being a little bit like, nah, what are you on about? Is just being kind, give over, I'm going to go and work at the local signwriter, which was the height of my ambition back in 2000, Luckily for me, I met people like Bill who one by one just put the bricks into that foundational wall of my own creative confidence. So, I don't doubt that. I don't ever doubt that I belong in here, that I'm as good as anybody out there, no matter the privilege. But it takes years, it takes decades to galvanise yourself to that degree. But I would really love to get stories like that in front of school children and kids from tough backgrounds today who really need that sort of confidence and those mentors. Anyway, that's just something. So let's get into it. Here is a reading of chapter The Power of Naughty from The Creative Condition. I hope you enjoy. I would love your thoughts. Cheers for listening, guys. And thanks again to Chris for sending that in. Chat to you in a bit. The Creative Condition, Chapter 31. The Power of Naughty. If educational institutions were, by law, forced to replace the word naughty with descriptions of its motivating feelings, curious, frustrated, angry, unheard, we'd have a siren and a clear brief for the needs of every little fucker who ever stepped out of line. My school science lessons, these chaotic and unmanageable bear pits, had a great positive bearing on my soft skills and ability to get by among a group of challenging people, and eventually in the business world. The rigidity of the education system failed to meet the needs of the students who caused mayhem. This manifested in comedy and acts of creativity that, while unacceptable in that context, should have been enough of a clear indication that this energy needed housing elsewhere. Writer and musician Blind Boy is the host of the hugely popular The Blind Boy podcast. Blind Boy is something of a polymath and, fascinated by creativity, he reflected on his time at school during this podcast episode, an essay about the inside of a tennis ball. He says, "When I left school, I fucked up so badly, I didn't even get a leaving certificate. I left with society saying, 'You're a failure.' I had no identity, no self-esteem, no goals, and I didn't know where I was going to go. I was saying to myself, if school's like that, then society is going to be worse, and you're an adult then." So at the age of 19, I had a breakdown. I had severe depression, anxiety, agoraphobia. I look back on it now and I say, I was just too curious for school. I'm autodidactic. I teach myself. Being in a room full of people, having to follow rules of how to behave, sitting still for fucking ages. I learn while pacing. If I'm engaging with an idea and engaging with my creativity, I pace up and down and often listen to music. I need movement and music in order to use my brain effectively. I can't sit down for hours and think. Blind Boy is now a prolific creator, a creative trailblazer doing incredible work for mental health, the environment and neurodiversity, all while entertaining and community building. One recent guest on his show was the President of the Republic of Ireland. He says he'll cover 20,000 steps in his office easily while creating, generating ideas. Invariably, Blind Boy, like countless other gifted people, did not understand the stress he was suffering because of education's rigidity. So he turned the energy into jokes and mischief to amuse and get in trouble. Once he knew he was good at it, he did it more. And, just like when a kid is told by adults in their lives that they are good at something, we frame as positive and desirable, he did it more and more, with increased passion and skill. Don't make the mistake of thinking there is no creativity, skill or intelligence required to be mischievous. The title of the podcast, an essay about the inside of a tennis ball, was the brief in his detention. He said that writing essays about the inside of a tennis ball were the only things in school that engaged his creativity. That the teacher would bin what he now considers his earliest short stories at the end of each detention to highlight that this was punishment, when perhaps they should have responded to this beacon of potential. Once ostracised from school, the majority of young people tend to lose their way and in many cases wash up angry and broken in secure children's homes in the hands of people like Jen Lucas. Jen Lucas is head of home at a children's secure home. She works with young people between the ages of 10 and 18 who have found themselves in the UK criminal justice system. It infuriated me that the broader education brilliantly provided in her home is not in place much sooner, in all levels of school. This is not just a UK problem. Several sources, including the US Department of Education Policy and Programme Study Service, report a disproportionate rise in government spending on correction over education. As soon as Jen told me her profession, I was hungry to chat to her about misbehaviour and its potential creative value. The prominent age group we work with is between 12 and 16, and most of them have specific needs, be that mental health or learning disabilities, Jen tells me. Although secure means children cannot go out, they have access to lots of things within the building. The rooms are really nice, and they have access to positive things within that, which some people struggle with. They think that someone who has committed a crime should be met with punishment. That's not how we work. We don't tend to turn young people's misbehaviours around if that's how we meet it. We have a residential section, which is the day-to-day care with overall mum and dad roles. We have mental health, so psychologists, education psychologists, doctors and nurses coming in. We have education provision, so school is on site and the children attend school as they would on a normal working day. We have an intervention section. Depending on the crime the young person has committed, during the week they'll have intensive sessions where we tackle certain areas with them, whether that be knife crime, sexual offences, robbery, everything really. Jen's father set up a football club in the local community that exposed her to the necessity of belonging and an inclusive community for a range of young people from an early age. She explains, "A lot of people were struggling. There was a lot of poverty. My dad was the chairman for around 25 years. I was brought up with my dad having an open door policy for the kids playing football who couldn't afford a pair of boots. Dad would go out of his way to organise charity events to raise money. My dad was adopted, so in the back of my mind, I always had his example of how well he'd done despite childhood adversity. What I do well is the love and care, things these children have never experienced. Lots of empathy, lots of support, lots of honesty. No fibbing, hiding behind things, or making excuses. A lot of these children have already been fighting before they're born. Alcohol, drugs. Then they're born and they must battle every day for things we take for granted. The trauma they've come into contact with is unbelievable. I'm not excusing the behaviour that has resulted in them being here because it's wrong, but it's not a surprise. I lament the lack of free, open, accessible space for children who cannot afford to pay to get into gyms and leisure centres, or buy coffees from corporate coffee chains, places to play, relax and learn soft skills through essential exploration of themselves, particularly in cities and urban environments. Without this, the foundational maturity and smarts to succeed in professional environments are harder to acquire. It's about the basics, says Jen. Where I walk the dog each morning, it's a little wood. It's quiet, a haven. Some of the kids I work with have never even experienced that. So for that reason, we have areas here with flowers and wildlife. We have a pond. It's all about the senses. Open space and nature are so holistic, so good for you. If you're young, living in a packed estate full of only flats and buildings, it tends to exacerbate certain behaviours. Of course, not all of the time, but we all want to spread our wings and fly a little bit, and that's not happening in urban areas for these kids. Indeed, there are many studies that consistently report crime reduction, easing of stress, and better general well-being for people who can access green spaces, particularly woodland, and even just see trees from their home. But should we need science to tell us this? We are a part of nature. Our loss of connection with it was always going to impact us on every level. I get angry when adults condemn people in prison or secure children's homes for having access to anything seen as superfluous or recreational, as if that's a treat or reward for their bad behaviour, as opposed to a key for the carers to understand and help to set their life on a better course. If you work in a job and your boss is horrible to you, how conducive is that to you delivering good work? Ponders Jen. It's just not going to happen. If you're nasty, or if you shout at someone, the chances are they'll be nasty or shout back. A lot of the young people are aggressive or angry when they arrive here. They're frustrated and unhappy with their circumstances. If you meet that with something different to what they've been used to, don't meet fire with fire, but meet it with some understanding and sympathy, asking them what we can do to help you not to feel like that. Then you'll work through the triggers and behaviour management. We want them to leave here in a better place. Human needs are not complex, but I don't believe that it's education's purpose to meet them. Formal education has always fed the cause of economic growth, not social or individual growth. And yet here, as children are handed to organisations like this one, why are basic needs being catered for only when young people have lost every other opportunity to succeed in their lives? Could the economy not benefit from more thriving people? We had one boy who came in, and most of what he talked about was violence and what he wanted to do to another person, says Jen. The love in her eyes is there to see. The feelings she has for this human in her voice. We discussed that, and I told him that made me sad, because childhood shouldn't be about that. I said it made me worry about my family. We talked honestly about, and we've done some great work with him since. He doesn't talk about the gang culture or that part of his life much anymore. If he does, the macho bravado is gone. He's remembered how to be a child. That's my job. Trauma has creative value, but people cannot access that without kindness, patience, respect, and flexibility in how and where this is taught. How can anyone recognise the potential, even in their worst behaviours, if they believe that bad exam results equate to total life failure? Traditional educational environments and methods of communication don't work for children who need more than trivia. This need not be complex. Being on a games console can be the biggest time of engagement if a member of staff is sat by them, because they might end up talking inadvertently, highlights Jen. It's not as if the second secure unit staff stick the kids in front of a screen just to give themselves an easy life. She says, "When I worked in the community, the most disclosures that I ever had happened in a car. I'm not interviewing them or asking direct questions, so I'm not sat directly across from them. They're just sat in the car at the side of me, passing time, and that comfort has better outcomes than any kind of formal assessment. What people don't realise with the games consoles is that there are various levels of learning needs, autism, for example, and they're absolutely fabulous for them, one of the only times they're able to relax. It's not all Mary Poppins either. The kids have to do things to get this stuff, but most of them have never been to school. Education probably needs to be reviewed because they come here and very quickly get on board with the education. They get up every day, attend, and do very well because they are like sponges, desperate to learn. We have an arts teacher, we have a woodwork room, we have bricklaying, a sports hall, a mini gym, a science room, all on a smaller scale than schools, but all things that have to keep them engaged. In smaller classes, with teachers who have the ability to engage them on an individual basis, these young people thrive. From that, they get their rewards, games and activities. We do independence work, cooking, ironing, washing clothes and gardening. One boy has done a piece of work where we have a small garden area with a fishing pond in it. He's gone away and done research into what plants would be best in there. We cook, so we're looking at plant some foods that we can use on a daily basis. That idea came from a health and wellbeing staff trip to the RHS gardens. This is a very emotionally draining job, so we get the staff out on field trips. We got ideas and brought them back. Now we're growing our own potatoes and strawberries with the kids. During UK grime artist Stormzy's 2019 Glastonbury headline set, riders on mountain bikes circled the rapper in a beautiful symmetry. These skilled young people have also appeared in the music video for his single Vossi Bop. They were not part of some theatrical academy and, before this crowning moment for the Bike Storms movement, an incredibly powerful culture I'd only just begun to hear about a year or so prior to when I stumbled across news reports covering mass bike ride-outs in London. They were, in the eyes of anyone who saw a newspaper headline about gang culture or stabbed teenagers, probably tracksuit sporting, knife wielding, heroin dealing, devil children. The response to thousands of young people wheeling their way through the city, shutting down roads, was polarised, though from what I could see, the negative backlash was predictably prejudiced and fear-based. Influential sections of the UK media take gang violence and amplify isolated incidents out of proportion time and again, calling for greater police power and crackdowns. Young people in sportswear have become poster children for this stereotype, particularly those from economically challenged neighbourhoods. I loathe the obscenely normalised failure to tap into the chaotic energy found in young people who will walk through the doors at Jen Lucas's secure children's unit. Mac Ferrari is a former bus driver who lost 25 friends to gun and knife violence, and partly in response to a tumultuous home life, committed robberies and other crimes. He rode motorbikes, and, after deciding enough was enough, he chose to use his positive motorbike culture status to start Bike Storms, a movement of young people riding through London on push bikes. I met Mac through Charlie Dark, a poet, youth mentor, and founder of Run Dem Crew, a collection of creative heads with a passion for running and the exchange of ideas. Charlie and Mac attended a launch exhibition of my Lend Me Your Ear collaboration with photographer Andy Cotterill in Covent Garden. The exhibition took place at the Stance store. Stance is a US sock brand that supports athletic and creative projects including both Run Dem Crew and Bike Storms. Mac, Charlie and I had a great chat, and the next morning, while manning the exhibition, I was delighted to see Mac come by again. He came down to the basement space and said hello, looked around and returned upstairs. I watched on in awe as 20 or so Bike Storms riders, ages ranging from 11 to 12 to late teens, came down on their bikes, tore around the space without damaging the art before laying down their bikes in the corner. Mac introduced me to all of them and asked if I could tell them about the project. I did, and they took a look around the exhibition, asked me some more questions before leaving with Mac. I was astonished by the work he had done, how these young people, so misunderstood and feared in society, had found such belonging to a positive community through Bike Storms. Mac was a shining example of just how powerful a more holistic learning environment can be, and what is possible if we seek to welcome in people who have lost their way and use their raw energy for something better instead of throwing them in society's bin. It took years, but I managed to pin down Mac and co-founder of Bike Storms, Jake 100, for an afternoon to hear their whole story. I did this thing called Write Off World, where I gave my car to the community, let them write on it, artwork, whatever, says Mac. The aim of that was to show that I value you more than this car, and I want you to value yourself and your friendship groups more than these material things. They can come if you do things the right way, not the way that I did it. What I wanted to do for the young people, it wasn't enough. It was great for 2 hours, but when I leave, there's still that drug dealer over there trying to give you drugs. There's still your mum and dad abusing you. There are things going on in your house that I can't fix just by turning up in a car. Mac met Jake 100 at Brimsdown dirt bike track in London. Jake was 15, part of a group of teenagers who came down on BMX and mountain bikes. Mac details how he immediately saw the potential in this gang of talented riders who were there, doing it for no other reason than a love of riding and the community it gave them, the most natural form of autotelic experience. I wanted to start a youth club at first, but that's just one youth club. If I've got one in South London, are kids in North London going to come? I wanted to help kids across London. A youth club was also my ego, to say to my fam, look, I've just got a building. I had to be ego checking. A fixed location is not going to be freedom, so the streets became my youth club. I'll be out here. These lot love riding. It's nothing that I have to force them to do. They're doing it off their own back. They've chosen their bikes. Why would I have to get a youth club to build programs when they've chosen a program? We've just got to facilitate it, guide it. My contract with the kids was, don't fight each other, and I will break my back to build what we're doing, to put respect on what we're doing, and give it a direction. Mac and Jake live the culture. They scheme and plan constantly, and the creativity, not just in the skillful aspect of riding, but in the shared love of riding, the incubating society that has grown from the seed of their idea. The culture is a safe haven for young people to grow, something I wish I had existed for the people I saw kicked out of school, only to encounter adversity and trauma in their lives. Jake has become a Tony Hawk-esque figure, using his hard-earned global profile for good, raising money for local bike repair shops that double up as homes away from home on London estates, inspiring others through his rides around the world. We are who we are. We mean what we mean. Our intentions are pure, says Mac. The council would always tell us, you can't just be here. You've got to put a cause behind it. We got a beautiful cause. We're here riding. Our time is occupied. From the car, I had your time for 2 hours, to the bikes, you're riding every day for 10 hours straight. While Mac is dubious about the media's distillation of the culture down to the strapline of bikes up, knives down, there is no denying its clarity and call out to vulnerable young people. Intelligence, creativity and belonging, through the simple aggregator of riding a bike, characterise the cause. These same traits that are at play in drug dealing, scamming or robbery only need redirection, not teaching. The impact of this redirection can be transformative, and when the fight and desperation, the human need for purpose or acceptance in people who've had tough starts is harnessed in a positive way, the potential is great. This is how we empower the next generation to thrive in an ever-changing world. When my twins were 3, I took them down to the Bike Storms event just so they could feel that positive charge, see all that vibrancy, and hear that humanity pounding the drum of the soul, because it is infectious and there is no better environment for human creativity than the coming together of people with something positive to share. School, in its current form, is the antithesis of this. Jake 100 is taking over from Mac as the Bike Storms leader. In the room, as we talk, is T.O., who lives with Jake rent-free in return for full-time videography and photography as Jake rides all day, every day. It's an impressive move and has enabled Jake to amass over 250,000 social media followers. But validation is not his currency. He tells me, Bike Storms created that community for everyone, no matter where you are in London or the UK. For me, very visually and very personally, I would see the effects of Bike Storms because my 1 or 2 mates that would go to central London and ride week in, week out and be a part of this community and work on that. We're good. We've got goals. We're trying to push this. We're growing on our social media, which we know in future can potentially bring opportunity and whatnot. Having bike storms, when you're there, you're there. You're not hearing people talking about the issues and street problems. You're hearing people talk about what parts they've got on their bikes, what tricks they want to do, what content they want to film. It's a whole different world that separates that. Bike storms can really change someone's direction and thought process. Jake expresses gratitude for a stable home life, with support for his creativity. Mac feels the range of backgrounds is crucial for learning. Bike storms is a huge mix of middle-class children and poverty-struck children, he explains. One of the hugest things that I'm proud of. I've seen someone from an estate block walk into someone's 6-bedroom house and it's like, your eyes are going to be open now. Go look at that house. Come away from it. Go back to your block and say what you saw. Inspire everyone to say, I want to see if I can obtain this now. Mac picks up the story. Problems in your head. Stress at home. As soon as that bike wheel goes up, you don't even think about it. There were kids that I rode with who were autistic. I rode with them for like 6 months. I had no idea until we stepped off the bikes that you're autistic. I had no idea you stuttered. I had no idea you had learning difficulties. When you're riding on a bike, it's a bike. All you really need to be able to do is go, woo, woo, hey, aye, hey. Anyone can make those noises. People who wouldn't be able to make easy friendship circles because of the things that were holding them back in life. They're in friendship circles where everyone's deemed the same. Your bike's going to make you the same as me. Racism, here it doesn't exist. A white guy stops and gives a black guy his tyre kit when his tyre's down. There's no colour here. We ride. One of my close friends and web developer, Shane Gall, suffered his own fair share of childhood adversity. And I used to think of him as a little fucker before I got to know him. For him, the computer was his equivalent of Jake 100's bike. We passed one another every morning, 6 days a week on newspaper rounds that served different parts of town. He ran 5 rounds to my 1. We were paid £1 per day, per round, so the grind required to make £10 could almost kill a kid. We became friends and I soon recognised his tenacity and spirit. There's a bullishness to Shane, a work ethic that can often be a side effect of early responsibility. In his case, being raised by a single mother. It would shape his creativity, but not before Shane found himself routinely in trouble, sat in the office of our secondary school deputy head, who, aware of Shane's IT skills, recruited him as an accidental one-man IT department. The only class I received any praise in was IT, laughed Shane. Our deputy head had pulled me out of class for showing up in trainers, and, on our way to get the notorious size 11 loafers he made me wear, we bumped into the IT teacher, who praised my work in front of him. From that point on, whenever I got kicked out of class and sent to him, he'd have me doing his typing up, Excel spreadsheets and all sorts of computer-based work. My defiance in religious education was what kept getting me sent to him, and what was supposed to be punishment never was to me. Not only did I get out of RE, but I also got to sit and use a computer all the time. I thought, more fool him, at the time. But now, looking back, I think he was more frustrated than angry with me. I think he was the kind of teacher who saw potential in people and probably knew what he was doing more than I ever realised. Shane was 2 school years younger than me. I left having barely written a sentence on Microsoft Word document, partly down to my own idiocy, treating IT as a chance to mess around, but also because it was the mid-1990s. Accessible technology, especially for working class kids like us, was still in its infancy. Shane left school earlier than most, after spending time in various factory, packing and retail jobs he did not love. But he was always a big gamer, and I watched him continue to develop increasingly complex tech skills, including building machines for himself and others. I shared a car ride with him to buy parts for a PC, which he took home and used to customise an existing machine. Not too long after that, I bought one of his Frankenstein's monsters, and we now had our first family computer. A decent spec at a fraction of the price of the ones on the high street. Only then did I begin to learn how to use one. I had a computer from a fairly early age, Shane tells me as I ask for the backstory he never shared before. My mum bought me a second-hand PC from a friend's son, and it wouldn't even run the most basic version of Football Manager, which was so frustrating, so I started scavenging for parts, claiming any old machines people I knew were getting rid of, and stripping them down in the hope it had better parts than mine. It was a disaster to start with. I blew 4 or 5 up. It was like Rice Krispies up there. Snap, crackle and pop. My mum going fucking nuts. Eventually, I learned and built my own machine out of a load of old spare parts. It ran the game really well. Beyond that, I loved to run programs, experiment, and probably a year or so after that, we dabbled in the tiniest bit of code in IT at school, written in Microsoft Word. I remember everyone else moaning, saying it didn't make sense, but I loved it. I'd come out grinning. I wanted to go to college and study it, but unfortunately, I didn't get the grades I needed at school. And they wanted to stick me on the basic word processing and Excel spreadsheet course, which my ability was far beyond that at that point. I refused to sit there for 2 years learning things I already knew, so I took the first warehouse job that came along. During a recent conversation about his work as a web developer, Shane told me he enjoys the applied mathematics his work requires. The crossovers between the two subjects are plain to see. For all those kids with tech skills in similar shoes to Shane, surely greater fluidity between mathematics and technology is critical. More shades of grey would enliven them if it taps into their passions and pleasures. And what about the balance of body and mind? I knew the restlessness that had so often landed Shane in trouble in school could become a huge asset if someone had been willing or able to work with that. Hard work was no problem for him. He lacked direction, and like many, had never stopped to consider the merits of what he did for pleasure. Back then, I couldn't take IT and PE at GCSE subjects because they were in the same category, Shane explains. That really pissed me off. I was good at sport and I loved it, but I was forced to drop it to pursue IT. But I didn't connect with much else in school, so I'd mess about and disrupt lessons. Without the grades and well-meaning family pressure to get the job, I thought, fuck it, I get £250 in my hand each week for the warehouse position and filed a job in IT away with other distant dreams like being a professional footballer. I saw Shane grow miserable in a couple of jobs he worked. This frustrated me, marvelling over the skills he employed to not just build custom machines without any technical training, but also the coding with which he created video gaming football leagues, groups, and other pieces of software, and became an almost weekly burst of admiration. I asked him if he had considered seeking another way to study and crystallise the self-taught stuff. He hadn't, but my suggestion timed well with his discontent, and, after a bit of research, he signed up for an open university course with his two sons while his two sons were still very young. He now builds, maintains and designs websites and custom software for hundreds of small, medium and large businesses, and is as nerdy about it as you can possibly imagine. While I know Shane well enough to recognise the role his single-parent upbringing played in his drive and maturity, Jen Lucas, who works with youth offenders, recalls a story which highlights just how bad it can be. She says, I went on a training course and met a retired police officer who was there doing some motivational speaking about the importance of education. He told me about this lad in Liverpool who he'd constantly been picking up for theft, robbery, all sorts of crime. He just used to pick him up, throw him in the back of the van and into a police station. That was how it went. This one day, he'd had enough and decided to take the lad home. He said he walked in and there was no carpet, no wallpaper. He looked in the fridge, no food. He said it was the most powerful thing that could have happened to him. No wonder this kid was stealing, hanging around with the people who gave him the nice trainers and a nice t-shirt. He said the solace going to school can give a child is massive, and he didn't think education takes enough responsibility. I will put money on all of the children who we work with having not been in full-time education. That 5 to 6 hour window when they go to school and they can get some food and try different things. If things are bad at home, then school is taken away. What else is there? Jen would later tell me about the joy she felt seeing a boy who wouldn't speak upon arrival, who hid behind his hair and engaged with nobody, getting up on stage and performing a song at the unit's Christmas performance. Misbehaviour is an expression of something a person doesn't know how to communicate in a better way. Creativity and community can provide this. Instead, we punish and dig a deeper hole, ignoring their needs. If we, as a society, can find ways to be patient, drop stigma and prejudice, and show naughty people the immense potential in their existing behaviours, then this unique, vibrant energy not only illuminates the individual, but benefits all of us massively on a cultural, social, and professional level. Thank you for listening, guys. I hope you took something from that. As you can tell, this is a major cause of mine. It's something that's always come up on these shows. It is my lifeblood. I consider myself very working class to this day. And like I said earlier on at the top of the show, I sat there trying to write something overtly about what it means to be working class. But I really think that a way of life, a culture, these values, they're better spelled out through our stories and our experiences, which is why I wanted to read you that chapter, because I think it's quite profound and valuable to share it that way. I think when you share things anecdotally and through experience, it strikes home in such a great way, because it encourages other like-for-like stories or comparisons, and it just lets you into a life rather than something that is a little bit more curated and fine-tuned, because this way of life is not curated and fine-tuned. A lot of working class people pinball from job to job or from paycheck to paycheck and really live life without luxuries. And that story by Jen Lucas there at the end about the copper taking the kid home to find just nothing. I've seen that countless times of kids I grew up with where they're living in circumstances that it wouldn't be too strong to sometimes call it neglect. That's how bad it is for some of those kids. So they don't just turn up to school and be little shits for the sake of being little shits because they're bad. They're expressing deep pain, hurt, sacrifice. I think that's something that is very working class. I think that struggle is real. And until you live that struggle, it's very hard to just get a sense of how hard it is to then dream and to have ambition and to apply yourself to something that is so far removed from your daily grind and your daily troubles that all you can do is kind of mock it and sabotage it and become good at being an antagonist. And I just think there's really valuable energy in that. So for the second part of this week's podcast, I am going to read out Dirty Energy, which is the follow-on chapter where I get deeper into this and talk to some teachers and people from dance and drama backgrounds about how we sort of move forward with this stuff. Still very keen for your thoughts. Beautiful story there from Stickman Chris at the start of the show, which I am so thankful of him sending me in, because I just think it's so perfect and pertinent for this continued exploration. So coming up on the show, I've got Sarah Prinsloo also discussing working class themes, although not overtly an episode about that. Sarah's background is also that, and she speaks about working class women and how it would be great for them to have a louder voice in society, and in our creative industry. So I hope you enjoyed this. Get us your thoughts. hello@bentalon.com would be most welcome. I love hearing from you guys. Loads of great feedback from Carl Chinn's episode, so please do go back and listen to that Being Working Class, episode 239 of The Creative Condition. Please do consider leaving a review, subscribing to the show, or leaving a little rating. It's a massive help. It's the best way you can support the show for free. I would love for you to do that. So please, if you haven't already, do take a second to go and help me out that way. The Creative Condition book, from which I have read this chapter today, is available now. bentalonwriter.com/shop for your signed paperback copies. Limited. Do them independently, so they're not going to be around forever. You can also get it on Amazon Kindle store for you ebook readers. I enjoyed reading this, so I need to crack on and get the audiobook done for those who prefer to listen. So that is in the making. I will also try to do an audiobook of Champagne and Wax Crayons, my first book, Riding the Madness of the Creative Industries, the subtitle for that. Keep in touch. Let me know what you've been up to. If you want to pitch yourself for a show, I am very open to that. Lovely. Cheers, guys. Take care, and we'll see you very soon.